Hello, and welcome back to Hello Hayes, an advice podcast that doesn't claim to have all the answers, but does promise to make you think. The first half of that was a really good one liner from my friend and Hello Hayes listener, Jane Green, who, after my episode 2 weeks ago, when I was talking about needing a one liner to open the pod, sent me, she's a copywriter, and sent me some really great lines. And I really loved that first bit. Doesn't claim to have all the answers. I feel like that's a key part of Hello Hayes. Another friend, Angel Carrier, wrote, Hello Haze, a podcast where we work through the mental haze together. Haze spelt Haze. I feel like ever since I was little, probably dating back to camp, people would there's so many puns and, puns plays on the word haze. And like getting through the haze, purple haze. People have been saying that since I was young. And I love that too, though I think that pun works better like when in the written word. Like maybe on merch one day we'll have something with Haze. But shout out to Angel and Jane for responding to my plea, and being my work besties. I've talked about before how sometimes like internet friends, people who fans of Hello Hayes, you feel like my work besties. When I've asked questions about what you like or what you think about certain things, it means a lot to me to hear from you and to get your feedback. And being my internet work besties is a great segue into today's episode, which is about a work bestie relationship. And work bestie is certainly not a term that I created, but it is a term that's included in my six besties theory. And for those who don't know, six besties theory is one of, I guess, the friendship theories that I don't want to say that I'm known for. That kind of makes me put my shoulders up. But it's a theory that I created that a lot of people like and has become popular. Anyway, the work bestie is one of the six besties, which is based on the idea that we have different friends in life for different purposes. It's rung true for me in my adult friendships. I think it's actually been like the key to the reason why I have so many rich and different types of friends and relationships in my life is because I don't expect any one person to fulfill all of my interests and needs in relationships. And the work bestie has proven time and time again to be one of the most important types of friends that I've had in my life. And it seems to be kind of a controversial one because while I feel that I couldn't exist at work without making really true good friends, other people feel like work is a place for work and I don't want to mix work and play and I have my friends separate. I like to keep it separate. And some people feel really like resolute on that. I'm certainly that way with some people. Like I'm not trying to become work besties with everyone, but having work besties was my saving grace, is my saving grace. It's been really interesting working for myself now, how I have been like trying to fill the work bestie gap. It's a journey, man. I'm still figuring it out. But I've noticed that I've started to feel a lot more confident and happy in my work as making Hello Hayes as an independent person when I've been trying to kind of find new work besties in my life. I mean, when you think about it, most of us spend most of our time at work. And I guess for me, it would feel just really sad to not have an intimate relationship, maybe close is the better word. Close, not necessarily intimate. A close relationship with someone where I'm spending so much time. So I am all for work besties, but just like any relationship, sometimes you run into challenges with your work bestie. And occasionally, how to solve those challenges might be a little bit different given the fact that you do also exist in the workplace together. This letter today covers lots of things. It covers work friendships. It covers what I wish I knew when I was in my 20s, starting out in my career. It covers the pitfalls of perfectionism, the merits of overcommunication, one of my favorite communication strategies, and how to have challenging or maybe awkward is the better word, because I don't think actually the conversation that needs to be had here is challenging per se, but how to have awkward conversation with work besties and besties at large, though Again, when you run into a work problem with your work bestie, it does feel extra complicated because you're bringing the normal, it would feel awkward no matter what when you run into an issue with a friend, but adding on kind of all of the external pressures and specific stressors of being at work, it just is like a real fun double whammy. So without further ado, let's say hello to today's letter. Hello, Hayes. I've been working in journalism for about a year and a half, and I really love my job. My team is awesome and made up of other early career women who have become my work besties. Since I've started this job, I've dealt with some of the insecurities that come with being new to the working world. I'm hard on myself and consider myself a perfectionist when it comes to the things I'm passionate about, my work included. I was onboarded and mentored by one colleague who works on our social media accounts with me. Let's call her Cassie. Cassie approaches our work with an intensity that I fear and admire. It seems like she's always one step ahead and constantly has things in order. Often I find that we're great collaborators because we're both equally passionate and are open to each other's thoughts and ideas. That being said, my approach to our work is less meticulous and more creative, whereas she's very planned out and organized. We joke this makes us such a great team, but I find myself comparing my work to hers and often feeling inadequate. She frequently messages me about things that I already have on my radar, like posting a tweet or editing a reel, and it feels like she assumes I hadn't even considered them. I feel like I spend a ton of time reassuring her that I'm going to deliver. There's never been a moment in my memory that I haven't delivered, but something about her messages and communication style makes me feel like she's just waiting for me to fail. I'm not sure how to bring it up or even if I should. We're friends outside of work now, and I value our friendship and working relationship. I feel that my own insecurities are causing me to misinterpret or overthink her intentions. I don't want to jeopardize our working relationship over something largely due to my own lack of confidence. I really value your advice, Hayes, and appreciate your thoughtful approach. Any insight you have would be greatly appreciated. Yours, the comparing coworker. Comparing coworker. The first thing I want to say is welcome to the working world. And I don't mean that in like a glib way, but I think that the tricks your brain is playing on you tend to begin your brain learns new tricks when you enter the working world for the first time. The comparison you're describing, the insecurities, the overinterpreting, I think that part of your brain like kicks into gear in a whole new way when you have a job and are it's I know in college and in school, and even if you had previous jobs, there's something just so specific about like working in the corporate world for the first time. And I'm using the word corporate kind of broadly. So even if your job isn't technically corporate, but like having a 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 or whatever it is, showing up, your brain is responding here. And I am excited to be talking to you because I feel like you have an opportunity now to get ahead of some of the things that I now at 30 am unlearning. You you have an insecurity. You have an insecurity that your work isn't good enough, that you're not good enough, and your brain is searching for evidence that that insecurity is real, that it's not fiction, it is fact. And our insecurities love to be right. And this is something that I struggle with a lot. Like I got an email last week with some feedback, and prior to getting the email, I was feeling really nervous about what the feedback was going to be. And my brain started to bring in like all the fears that I have about myself and, my lack of talent, and I'm never going to be as good as this person, and, all the things that our brains do. And when I sat down and I opened the email, it was fucking remarkable how my eyeballs started, before I was even reading the words, my eyeballs were searching for like negative notes or like negative beliefs that would confirm my fears about myself. And I had to snap in front of my face. Like I had to snap out of it and be like, okay, hold on, Hayes. Hold on, bully. Stop doing that. Stop looking for proof that you are rotten. I share that because that is what I think that's some of what your brain is doing to you here. We're going to cover a lot in your letter. We're going to cover a lot of ground here, but I want to begin by talking about your relationship with perfectionism and how you used it in your letter. You wrote, "I'm hard on myself and consider myself a perfectionist when it comes to the things I'm passionate about, my work included." I too considered myself a perfectionist. Perhaps I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I don't think you're necessarily using it in the way that I'm about to describe, but I want to talk about perfectionism for a moment. Perfectionism, it's one of those, like, I feel like people use perfectionism as a humble brag. It's the thing you say in interviews when people ask for one of your flaws, and it's like, "Oh, well, I'm a perfectionist." And I think intellectually we all like know that perfectionism doesn't serve us. Perfectionism is poison for a creative person, for a curious person, for a person who wants to be kind and empathetic and even keeled at work. I think what I want you to know is that perfectionism can like be worse than you think. And I say that kind of dramatically because I think that so many of us identify as perfectionists and don't really understand the gravity of how toxic it can be for us. Perfectionism does not unlock your passion. The way you've kind of structured that sentence, you're a perfectionist, especially for the things you're passionate about. And I have felt that way too, that I'm a perfectionist about my work. And when I wasn't working for myself and I was sort of using my creativity in other jobs, I can only imagine how I would have felt and what I would have made and like the joy that I might have experienced in my 20s at work if I didn't take myself so seriously. And if I understood that perfectionism was robbing me of a lot of opportunity, not just in terms of career advancement, but in like ideas. Perfectionism stops most people from ever making anything. And that isn't quite what you are talking about here, but you said this is your first job, year and a half in. I want you to know that perfectionism does not feed your passion. It doesn't make it better. It really hinders it. And it can also hurt your work relationships. I know I have a lot of, am I going to use the word regret? Maybe not regret. Regret's such an interesting word. I sort of feel pressured to say that I have no regrets. I'm not entirely sure if that's true. There are a lot of times that I look back at my work relationships and wish that I was kinder and more patient with people. And I think that perfectionism and like insecurity, I suppose, wanting to be perfect, wanting all of my work to be perfect, and seen for me to be seen and associated with the high quality of my work often led me to be less human to people that I worked with at times. And of course, I might be being a little bit hard on myself, but I can think of many conversations where I lost my patience or, I sent off a Slack or an email and was a little bit, if I had taken an extra 30 seconds to like make it sound a little friendlier, that could have made a difference in someone's day. And this is why I think work besties are so important, and having real human relationships at work can be a balm to kind of the underbelly of perfectionism, which not only hurts your work, but it can hurt your relationships for those reasons I just described, because perfectionism can make you a shell of yourself. And while it might not seem that serious, I think that weeks turn into months, turn into years of enabling your perfectionist self. And then suddenly you might be 31. You might be 31 and spending a whole chunk of time and dollars in therapy trying to unlearn those perfectionist tendencies. So be aware of your perfectionism, and it could be something interesting to discuss with Cassie, actually, with your work friend, how separate from your relationship with her, talking about this feeling of being new to work, of comparing your work to others, of wanting to be perfect, of not wanting to continue the rest of your 20s, suffering under the chokehold of perfectionism. That could be an interesting thing for you to explore and might kind of cause her to think through some of her behavior and how she interacts with you too. These conversations about these deeper feelings at work are really good to have with a work bestie, because then you can also hold each other accountable. And in the heated moments where maybe perfectionism kind of comes out, whether that's you're on a deadline or there's a mistake with a project or, you fuck something up. Having had those conversations about the ways that you fear your perfectionism or your other insecurities at work, having had them, then when these tough moments come up, you're able to remember that you both are human. And of course, we should be able to remember the humanity in coworkers even when they're not work besties. But the reality is that when you have a personal relationship with someone, it's easier to maintain perspective. So that's what I want to say about perfectionism. And I'd love to flush that out more and talk more about perfectionism. So if any of you have thoughts on that, send them my way, and maybe I'll do a whole other episode dedicated to that, because I can feel myself cooking. If I sit with that topic for a bit, I think we'll come up with something good. So perfectionism's over there now. I want to talk about your relationship with Cassie and offer a generous interpretation of Cassie's behavior. So a generous interpretation, what do I mean by that? I believe, on occasion, more often than not, in looking for the generous interpretation of other people's actions. It's about looking for the least personal way to interpret what someone said or did. This is kind of essential for the overthinker, perfectionist, people-pleasing type, because we will often never think that what we've done is good enough, which is not a humble brag, not a flex. It is like a career and potentially personality defect. Maybe not that harsh, but maybe it's certainly a flaw that as I said before, people might try to flex, but it is not a flex. And I think that training my brain to look for the generous interpretation has been really helpful. So I want to give you a generous read of Cassie's behavior, which I feel confident to do because of the friendship you described. If you didn't feel that you were friends outside of work, like maybe there would be something else going on here, which I still will in a moment. Later on in the episode, shortly, I'll still throw out a couple of other possibilities, but the fact that you've called yourself a great team before, both of you, makes me feel confident to give this read. So, one, I wonder if Cassie's checking on the things that are on your agenda has nothing to do with your performance or what she thinks about you, and has everything to do with her and her anxiety. Maybe it has to do with her, potentially flawed ways of working. I wonder, is anybody asking her for regular updates? I don't know if she's senior to you. You guys might be like at the same level, but if she's senior to you, try to think about who's above her. For me at work, when I realized that the things my bosses did that bothered me or that felt stressful to me, when I realized that that was often a trickle down effect from what they were receiving, it didn't necessarily excuse some of their, micromanaging or just frustrating, annoying behavior, but it did make me understand where they were coming from and again, take it less personally. And that's kind of the goal here, or that's the micro goal for this part of our conversation, is how to protect your brain from overthinking and taking things personally. And part of the generous read is well, what do they have going on? What might they have on their plate? Who might be asking them? And then I can have a little bit of empathy from where they're coming from. Also, is this all happening over Slack? You said sending messages. It's really hard to read tone over Slack or Google Doc comments. It's really hard to read tone. And I have both felt victimized by Slack tone, and I have been the perpetrator of, unkind or just too harsh Slack tone. And it's a real fine line of wanting to make sure, and I feel women probably do this more, of trying to make sure that you sound extra nice and adding an exclamation point or a smiley face or, adding in a few extra words so that it doesn't sound so harsh. Women probably do that more, and I'm sure it can lean problematic, or, women taking on the emotional labor of wanting to control everybody's feelings. But also, when we take all of the emotion, sometimes just the quick sending stuff off, especially when you're asking for updates or delivering feedback, I don't know, adding in a few kind words and an exclamation point every now and then does make things feel warm. And I think we could use some more warmth back in how we communicate at work. But all that's to say, is this happening? Is this messaging happening over Slack? I still haven't gotten used to communicating with people via, typing messages. So take that into consideration too. Could you be misinterpreting the way she is slacking you? And it might actually be helpful to kind of think of her Slack personality and her friend personality as kind of two distinct things. Like if you've noticed a certain trend in how she sends messages, if you take the deliberate step to be like, okay, Cassie sends 4-word messages. It's not personal, this is just how she communicates. If you kind of deliberately acknowledge that, then when she sends you stuff randomly, you won't have to redo that every single time. You don't have to go through that emotional process of talking yourself off the cliff because you've just kind of accepted, okay, that's how Cassie is there. So, which brings me about the different personalities. This brings me to like my next work tip, which is about understanding the personalities you work with. This relates to Cassie, but also we can zoom out, and I want everyone to just think about their relationships at work. One of the things that helped my work relationships the most and saved me a lot of stress is over communicating. I'm a big over communicator. And by over communicating, I mean aligning on deadlines verbally and often in writing. Regularly giving status updates. So if I was working on something that was due next Friday, like I might provide updates throughout the week to let people know where I was. I would always communicate if and when I was going to miss a deadline, and I would talk about how I'm fixing it or ask for specific help so that we can fix it together. I'd often like repeat back what someone said to me. So if I was getting an assignment, I would make sure while I was accepting it that I was like repeating back what I heard and what I understood to make sure that we were on the same page. Asking for feedback. Asking for feedback is a way to over communicate. Those were just some examples, but I continue to really value over communication in my working relationships and in many of my relationships because for me, it reduces the anxiety of wondering, of overthinking, which again, for people who overthink, I think over communication can be really, really helpful because it just it doesn't completely remove the possibility for the anxiety, but it removes a lot of it when you can refer back to the specific conversation you had. And a lot of, especially in the workplace, because of all the things that you don't know that's going on behind the scenes for other people you work with, people really appreciate and value over communication. It's exhausting to try and constantly interpret what people want from us, and by over communicating, we get rid of that a little bit. You mentioned in your letter, I feel like I spend a lot of time reassuring her I'm going to deliver. I'm curious if that means that you are over communicating and you're just not used to over communicating. So when you say it feels like I'm reassuring her all the time, you're just like providing updates. Or, if she's constantly communicating her fears to you. When you say that you're reassuring her, is she saying, comparing coworker, I'm really worried that you're not going to meet this deadline, or like I'm really like, can you please, like I'm really stressed it's not going to get done. Is she doing that? Because that would be annoying. Or is she checking in? Like think about that difference for yourself, because perhaps you're just over communicating and you haven't quite gotten used to that yet, and you might not love it, frankly. But I wonder if reframing it as like, oh, I'm practicing this skill called over communication, which can be really valuable at work, could help you a little bit. There is a limit to over communication, obviously. I want to point that out. Constantly slacking your updates could be frustrating. And of course, asking for over communication as a manager in particular can very quickly become micromanagey. So anyone who's in a leadership position, if you are someone who values over communication, I would probably have like a open, honest conversation with the people you work with about why you value over communication, what you look for, why it helps you, and then ask them for what they think and how they feel about that and what they think would work for them. To hold you a little bit accountable, though, I'm curious now hearing me talk about over communication. Like, I wonder, are there ways maybe that you have not been very communicative about what you've been working on out of defensiveness, perhaps, or annoyance that she keeps checking in with you? If so, I really urge you to consider in instances like this where Cassie seems to be a little bit more anxious or potentially a little bit more high strung, organized, as you said, you kind of leaning into that over communication style just a little bit could really help her. But most importantly, it could help you because she could then be off of your back and you can feel in control of your updates rather than feeling like being hounded for them and like you're not trusted. But this whole thing that I'm talking about is sometimes described as managing up. Over communication might be included in managing up, though there's like lots of things that you do to manage up. And it's essentially like you as an employee or like as a team member taking into consideration the way your leadership works so that you can all work together better. I do think it's really important. I don't think there's a way to escape it. People who take into consideration other people's working styles, I think, do better and do better at work, probably. It becomes really, really thorny, though, when, of course, when the leadership styles are problematic, promote hustle culture, burnout, and then on another end could be, racist, sexist, homophobic, like even like microaggressions, managing up when there's toxic behavior, not good, and definitely prevalent. It also, though, on a not less serious note, but on a less, legal note, like part of the problem of managing up could be that it deflects responsibility from the manager to be, managing down. So that's not what I mean to say here. But if we're talking about tools in the toolbox for people pleasers, overthinkers, perfectionists to kind of feel better about themselves at work, I think that taking into consideration other people's working styles can really help. So to your question, should you address it or should you not address it? The way you're framing it right now, I noticed that you're like, should I address it? I don't want to jeopardize our friendship. And I want you to know that you can address it without jeopardizing your friendship. You can have hard conversations with friends and not ruin your friendship. So let's just say that right there. In a few minutes, we'll go through a script for, what you could say if you want to have that conversation. But I also want to throw into the ether that sometimes friends let things go. Sometimes work friends need to let things go. And maybe even work besties have to let things go more than other types of besties because you have the unique experience of being in a stressful situation together all of the time, where most people are not their best selves constantly. So if you and Cassie are great friends and you just have kind of noticed that like she has a work tick, but it's just kind of who she is, you might make the decision to let that go, to try over communicating a little bit, see if that helps. And if it does, it's part of accepting Cassie. It's part of working with Cassie. That's Cassie. Now, if that's Cassie starts to turn real problematic and real, painful for you or whatever, then of course we say something. I think letting things go works best when both people in the friendship are self-aware enough and reflective enough to then own up to when they've kind of been shitty. So it would be great if, on a day when Cassie was particularly stressed, she could say, hey, like, I know I was like really intense today. Like it was just a hard day. I'm sorry about that. It would be cool if she could say something like that. I remember not to like toot my own horn, but maybe this will inspire someone. During COVID, I was having a virtual call with somebody on our engineering team at the job that I had. And I was on the content side and she and I were working together on a project. And I was in like a shit mood that day. And I was just like stressed and exhausted and I don't know. We had this call, just the two of us. And I was really, really short with her, cold. I didn't like myself. I didn't like how I was. And I bet it didn't make her feel good. And I think the next day, I asked her to get on another call, and I apologized. I don't know exactly what I said, but it must have been something like, hey, I just wanted to tell you that I'm really sorry for how I acted in our call yesterday. You didn't deserve that. And she and I became really, really good friends. I miss her a lot. We haven't spoken in a long time. And she texted me a while ago and she saw that I was going through something and I never got back to her. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was overwhelmed in the moment and then just didn't. And I'm gonna get back to her now because she's so awesome. And we had a really like connected friendship for a long time. And even though we haven't spoken in a while, I still feel very connected to her. I think that when you have work besties, you have to be able to do stuff like that. And she and I weren't even work besties at that point, but we did become work besties, I think, after that. I share that story because work besties can go through hard things. Sometimes the path into work besties is by acknowledging the moments when you weren't as human as you'd like to be. I don't know how I got there from saying that maybe you should let things go, because that was a prime example of not letting something go and me, holding myself accountable. Anyway, you can also say something. You can also say something. But to do that, if you want to address Cassie's behavior, you have to put your friendship first. So don't go corporate lingo. Don't go work, don't go so work focused. Like really keep your friendship front and center. Tap into your friendship energy, not your coworker energy. You can be a little softer and perhaps more vulnerable with her about this since she's your friend than maybe you would if like this was just a coworker that you aren't friendly with. Here's a sample script. I've been feeling a little insecure about something at work with us, and instead of overthinking it, I thought I would just ask you directly. Sometimes when you check in with me about my priorities, it makes me feel like you don't think I'm going to get it done. Is that why you do it, or is it something else? Now, whenever I read you these scripts, by the way, like I'm not necessarily promoting, or I'm not necessarily suggesting read it directly, though I think you certainly could if that makes you more comfortable. I share it with you like that so you can see all the different points to hit. Sentence one, I've been feeling a little insecure and I want to bring it up directly. That's sort of like a throat clearer. Sometimes people need help. Sometimes we all need help figuring out how to begin a conversation. Beginning the conversation might feel like the hardest part, so that's why I included that sentence. The second, sometimes when you check in with me, it makes me feel this. That's acknowledging something she does and how you feel about it, but it's not telling her that she's doing something bad. But you're pointing out how an action of hers impacts you. And then you're straight up asking her what she means. Like, am I interpreting this correctly or is it something else? You're asking for clarity. Now, all of this should be said like with a smile. And again, if you're putting your friendship front and center, there's no way that you can really say it wrong. Because in a friendship, you want to trust that even if you do say a piece wrong, you guys will get through that together. She'll understand what you mean. You can correct yourself. It's not like you're going to, say one word and you're going to be stepping on an explosive. So give yourself some patience and grace if it like comes out a little bit fumbly. If your friendship feels more casual, then you can be even more casual about that. You could even just say, why next time she asks you, you could just say like, what's going on? What's going on? Why you keep asking me about this? You could adopt kind of a more casual, loose, silly tone if that feels appropriate for you. But just remember, like, number one, trust that you are friends. When I start to overthink a relationship, a work relationship, I have to say to myself, Hayes, remember that you like this person. You two are friends. You trust this person. If you're having trouble interpreting what they mean, you can just ask them. You can just ask them. Give it the generous interpretation, and if that isn't settling my mind, just ask. And I want you to know that too. I think this is really exciting that this is your first job, and you're getting to think really critically about these things now instead of down the line. Though, unfortunately, I think that these lessons are an ongoing conversation versus something we learn once and then are done with, as evidenced by me learning it all again every damn day. And I think that is a good place to end for today. I'm leaving for the Northeast tomorrow for 3 weeks. Brian and I, since we live out here in LA, and a lot of our family and friends are on the East Coast, we're doing like a little trip to see everybody. And I have not started packing yet, so I'm going to go begin doing that now. And I will chat with you guys soon. It's been so great. It's been so great talking. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and watch another video. Tell me in the comments what you thought about the episode. And if you listened audio only, YouTube is a great place for us to chat about your thoughts about the episode, questions you have, ideas for future episodes. I'm always in there responding, and it's great to. I really love getting to know all of the people in this community. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here and hanging out with me. And I will see you all soon. Bye.